So, welcome to Conversation 360 podcast and this Asia and the West series, Christine. I know you're in Shanghai while I'm speaking to you from New York, and I'm just delighted you're taking part. Welcome.
Thank you, Susan.
So, I'd like to talk about, especially around the issue of conversations taking place between Asia and the West. And I know that that has a great deal of meaning for someone like you who has lived in both parts of the world, especially now that you're back there and have been there for 2 years, really leading a major business. What's your approach to how things have developed since you were there last, and in the last 2 years, things move very quickly, I know. So just give me your impression.
Yeah, Asia is such a dynamic region compared to the rest of the world. As you know, it has some of the world's fastest growth GDP countries, and China in particular. The changes in the last 15 years in China is nothing, short of a miracle, I guess. If you look at the cityscape in Shanghai and Chinese major cities, I mean, it's just amazing what the Chinese government has been able to orchestrate. And the growth in middle class is really exploding in China. I'm sure you read the news in the U.S. as to all the Chinese tourists who want to go abroad and see things, to travel. So it's there are tremendous growth potentials in China, even despite the fact that the GDP has slowed. Actually, the GDP growth rate today is the slowest in the last 15 years. Slowest since 1999, I think. But it's still huge growth, huge potential due to the size of the economy and the growing middle class.
Well, you've mentioned a couple of things I'd like to pick up on. One is this slowdown, which, as you're saying, even though it has happened, is still pretty tremendous GDP. How has that affected people? Is there a sense that has the dialogue shifted at all during this slowdown, or are people really pretty much business as usual, feeling that this is just a part of what happens when there's been such explosive growth?
Yeah. I think it's both. Number one, people are adjusting to the slowdown, and actually, the government, the term for this is the new normal. Okay, so as a matter of fact, the government is trying to manage the GDP growth going forward, at least for the next planning period, which is the next 5 years, to be about 6.5%. GDP, which is the new normal level. And if you versus the 15% growth or double-digit growth in the last 15, 20 years. So that's one thing. The other thing is, the GDP growth is twofold. I'm sure you heard the term China's two-speed economy.
Yes.
The old traditional heavy industry, actually, they're in the decline. Okay, so they've been in the decline mode. Export has slowed in some months. They were negative export growth. So on the traditional industrial side, actually there's very little growth or negative growth, depends on what industry you're talking about. But the growth side comes from service, like financial services, travel and entertainment. I mean, like movie viewership or movie theater growth. I mean, they're more than 35%. So the other part is e-commerce. I mean, e-commerce. Their growth, the biggest sales day, they call the W11 sales day. Alibaba recorded 37% growth year over year, and they did $17 billion in sales in one day. So there's growth areas. And the other thing is, if you look at the two-speed economy, the luxury goods, they're still growing because the growing wealth of the Chinese consumers, and they want branded Western products. And while staples such as the working class consumables such as beer and even instant noodles, where the workers eat more, and they're on the decline. They've been on the decline since 2014, and that reflects the industrial slowdown. So the two-speed economy is the new norm, and the other thing the government talk about is transformation and upgrade the economy. Upgrading meaning to upgrade to more value added versus China being the manufacturing base. They're talking about innovation every day. You see a lot of innovations of China now, high tech, and the growth of innovation is much faster than, frankly speaking, the Western countries realize. If you, unless you're on the ground to see the just the amount of innovation that's taking place and the growth of, internet companies and high tech, it's just amazing. And the other one is transformation. They're trying to transform the state-owned enterprises again to be more value added versus just the manufacturing base for the world. So
that brings up several questions. One is you just touched on the what people call the SOEs, the state-owned enterprises, which have been
mm-hmm.
pretty much supported by the government and have been a little bit slower to really. Have they changed at all? Are they having to speed up their operations? Are they still being so protected as they were in the past? What's happening there?
Well, I mean, the Chinese government is trying to reform the SOE sector, which is a huge sector, and it's not an easy task. And if, I'm sure you read in a lot of Western media about China's debt problem. The debt as percentage of GDP, China is the third highest after Germany and the U.S. And the majority of the debt are SOEs to support the state-owned enterprises. And there are a lot of inefficiencies there, and the Chinese government is trying to do it very, very carefully to carry out the reform because so many people's employment is at stake. And the one thing the Chinese government doesn't like, or the Chinese culture doesn't like, is instability, especially social instability. So the government is managing that very, very carefully. And you talk about the steel industry. There's a huge overcapacity of steel. But they're not shutting down those plants. In the U.S., you'd be shutting them. They'd be shut down a couple of years ago. But they're managing it closely. Having the planned output because 2 to 3 million workers are impacted. So it is a very long journey, but they're trying to tackle that in a very planned way.
Now, you mentioned innovation. Let's talk about that a bit because, and you're right, the view from the West, certainly from America, is that they look almost patronizingly at China, thinking, "Isn't it great? They're hoping to become innovative." When it's what you're saying, and I've certainly observed this, they already are, and in fact, in some places, are really doing some pretty amazing stuff. Now, where is the innovation coming from? Since we know that the educational system is one that is, as at least I understand it, traditionally been based on rote learning. How does that all work if you don't have kids that are being taught how to be critical thinkers? There's something that's in the water there that is nonetheless producing people that are pretty highly innovative. Where's it coming from?
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess there are two to three key things. Let me just talk about the education system a little bit.
Please.
You're right. The Chinese education system, is pretty. It teaches kids to obey rules, to respect the teachers, to listen to the teachers. It does not encourage innovation per se. However, they pay huge attention to basic STEM education: science, technology, math, and engineering. And there's, in terms of basic STEM knowledge, the Chinese students are, I would say, far superior than most other countries. And as a matter of fact, I mean, I'm sure there's statistics that supports, if you look at the scores, they rank higher than the U.S. in terms of math skills and all that. And these things are the base foundation for innovation. So that's one thing that China has good going for them, other than the fact that the culture does not encourage out of the box thinking and does not encourage, it's more rule bound versus anything else. The other aspect of education, I had the pleasure of, at a breakfast meeting with the vice president for Shanghai Jiao Tong University, which is one of the premier universities in China.
Yes.
And he talked about the how they're innovating their education systems. And I was very surprised to hear that they have an experimental class that this is for engineering students. Mm-hmm. And first of all, they have all the lessons are taught by foreign professors, all in English. This is in China, in their China campus. So the whole teaching curriculum is all from overseas. In this case, it's my alma mater, which is University of Michigan.
Really? That's
and
fascinating.
They also send, Yeah. Oh, yeah. They also send kids to University of Michigan, the engineering school. They complete their education there, so they get enrolled. They get enrolled into um, the Shanghai Jiaotong University, and they finish all their the 4 years, and they get a degree, a dual degree, in from the University of Michigan. And this is only one of them. The Marshall School of Business at USC, they have a campus. They have a JV here with, or not JV, but joint program here with the Jiaotong University. So there are many relationships. They have sister schools with France. They have exchange students everywhere, and they realize that there's a lot to learn from an innovative, out of the box thinking side from their Western counterparts. But and then if you look at the students' performance at say the group of students that goes to the University of Michigan, they usually graduate top of their class in the engineering students because the basic math and STEM education is so strong in China. So I guess that strength offset the innovative side and then I mean the creative thinking side in my mind. And then you look at the amount of innovation, you look at in every front. I think the West view is China is very fast at copying. They do a great job copying. They're not good at innovating. That can be misleading, or that can be very wrong thinking because, and I'll just give you a couple examples. Everybody heard about Alibaba. Look at how fast they grew. Okay, they're the leader in the internet, area. And the other one is like the DD, the application that the ride sharing business in China. They're 4 years old. They bought Uber China because the Uber couldn't grow as desired as their plan, right? Because these companies, they know the Chinese culture, they know the huge potential here. They're so nimble and quick, and if you look at that, I mean, we talk about drones in the U.S. for years, or in China they sell more drones here, and electric vehicles. They sell more electric vehicles than the rest of the world combined. Okay, so the speed of innovation is fast, and then and the other thing, what I find really fascinating is, you talk to the Chinese entrepreneurs. I have never seen such optimism. You talk to
Really?
them, if they try something, they fail, they'll try something else. Everybody's thinking about making something big, and people want to be wealthy, and they have slogans. At some companies, their vision statement is to create so many billionaires or so many millionaires. So it's just the mentality is so different from the a lot of other areas, countries. So, and that's what I found. I mean, huge. It really, is the people's mindset and mentality. Everybody wants to do something. They want to own their business, or they want to get rich, and so it's, and just the feeling that everything is possible, really makes a big difference.
Well, since you do go back and forth between the two countries, you must have some observation about how the Chinese know they are pretty informed about what's happening in the West. And I
Oh
find
yeah.
that often I talk to a lot of Americans who are really ill informed about what's happening in China, not only about issues like innovation, but just in general. They have no sense of they walked into Shanghai, they would be flabbergasted. What do you think?
Yep.
What would you suggest needs to be done? Because it seems to me that we really all need to know each other better. What's the answer to that? The Chinese seem to have no problem teaching they've been learning English for a long time. We think we have an explosion of people learning Mandarin, but
Hmm.
actually it's fairly small.
Yeah.
What's the answer here, or isn't it important?
I think it's really important. I mean, as China's second largest economy now. I'm sure they have aspirations to be the very largest. It depends on how the next 4 years is going to go. There could be geopolitical power shift. Who knows? But you're right. I mean, the next generation Chinese, they are all speaking English. I mean, you come to Shanghai, a lot of people, at my office, everybody speaks English. The amount of the improvement there, from 10 years or 15 years ago with the English fluency is just amazing. But Mandarin is getting more popular, but it's not as many. Obviously, not as many people Americans speak Chinese than vice versa. Um, I mean, I think the Chinese people have this thirst about learning about America, and actually, it's funny. people think they know more than they do as well here. I had a friend from college who hasn't had huge exposure to the West, and he hasn't traveled to the U.S. So her point of U.S. is Desperate Housewives because that's the show she watches. And she said, "So all Americans live like that? They all, Desperate Housewives. So their view of the West can be a little skewed in terms of the value, people's value, and all that. So, oh no, that's just the show. You know that, right? But they think it's real. So, but at least they're curious in learning about the American culture. And I'm not sure if you look at the general population, the Americans are as curious about the Chinese culture. To, to learn as much about the Chinese culture.
Well, and
So.
I think to our peril. So you are quite optimistic about China's future, and that's clear.
Mhm.
Nonetheless, I know you're aware that there are major challenges for China, that it's facing issues about the environment, about healthcare
Mhm.
programs, about the whole issue around education. What would you point to as the things that you think are the major hurdles that China has to uh, somehow get over in order to continue this really ambitious future it has?
Yeah, I mean, environment is becoming, people are becoming way more aware about the environment, about the pollution than before. Now that I think it's a big issue the Chinese government have to tackle. Um, and the other thing is, a lot of, despite the fact that China has a lot of people got wealthy, and the people who have money, they still want to send their kids overseas, okay, to get educated, especially America, if people can do that. And you've heard there's the huge capital outflow from China to the West in both private capital and also companies doing acquisitions outside China.
Yes.
So and the government, I mean, they do, I think they can take measures easily, say they will control the amount of capital outflow and all that. So I think the pollution and managing the economic transformation, how to deal with the pollution, quality of life. And then that's why this has tied to do this government model of they want to upgrade and transform their economy, upgrade from dirty manufacturing to more high tech, innovation driven companies, and also more transition more to a service based economy. And these are all part of the plan. And the next 5 year plan, the biggest meeting is going to be held next year. So you see a lot of I think it's the 13th 5 year plan, if I remember correctly, which is I think early next year they're going to have the meeting. Everybody's is watching very closely as to what the directions coming out of that meeting. But you see a lot of if you watch the Chinese news, that a lot of talk about transforming the economy, upgrading the economy, doing more added to from manufacturing to innovation driven.
Yeah, and I would say that I can understand how critically important this all is because China is pumping out a lot of college graduates for whom
Mm-hmm.
they don't yet have all the employment that they would wish, at least at this at the college graduate level. So it's going to be
Mm-hmm.
tricky. Nonetheless, you're highly optimistic. Is the biggest
Mm-hmm.
source of your optimism the people themselves? This sense of high ambition, strong optimism about their
Mm-hmm.
country. Is that what is the driver, you think? Is there something else you would point to in terms of why everyone is so optimistic within the country? Because I certainly hear it when I'm there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that's one part. The people's mindset, and they want to do something, bigger. The other thing is, I mean, it's just the sheer size of the economy, right? So it's the world's second largest economy, and if you look at the even the middle class, okay, I think they were talking about 300 million middle class. That's bigger than the U.S. population. China has 1.3 billion populations, right? Right. So even the sheer size, and then for multinationals, our share is still small here. For at least for us, is our share here is much smaller than our share in the mature markets. So to us, we see still we see a lot of opportunities despite slowdown because we have a lower base to build on, and just like I said, the size of the economy. You know, so that's from my perspective, that is still represent really big potential.
So, is there something I haven't asked you about that you think is important when we're talking about these two parts of the world that are so important to each other? Anything that you've observed since you've been there for the last 2 years leading the operation? And I know you not only deal with China, but it's really Greater China, Northeast Asia, and Southeast Asia. You've got a pretty large piece of territory you're overseeing. What is there anything that you'd like to point out that you think has been important in your own thinking about what's happening?
I mean, yeah, you look at the political dynamics in the region, right? I mean, the Philippines, who's been allies with the U.S. for decades, now the new president is kind of aligning himself to China. And you talk about the South China Sea. I mean, the Chinese people view U.S. involvement there as pure meddling. I mean, because U.S. is so far away, for U.S. to express any views on that, it's just to them it's outrageous. So there are a lot of geopolitical sensitivities here, and also with the new administration, actually the Chinese government has been very measured in responding to all the appointments and the things that are happening with the Trump administration. But I think the key thing is people in the West need to understand that China or Asia, they're very, very different cultures, and China is very complex. The culture is very complex. Don't think, you really need to rely on the expert, because if you don't know the culture, you say things, saving face is big. It's very important here. People, if you say things that will make people feel they lose face, whether it's people, your business people you deal with, or government officials, it can really cause a lot more problems than
Yes.
And cause a lot of heartburn. There's a saying: the longer you live in China, the less you know about it, from a foreigner perspective. If you hear just for a week, you think, "Oh my gosh, I know China," and then actually you know nothing about China other than you've been here. And then if you've been here, a year, you think you can write a book about China. And then if you've been here 3 years, you might only think you can write an article about it. So it's just the more you know, the longer, and the more complex, the whole culture is. And China is only one piece. I mean, the same thing. Japan has a very different culture. Korea, the South culture. I think the thing is to be open-minded, to learn about the culture and adapt to it, and don't force the Western way onto the culture, here.
Well,
and that would be,
as someone said to me recently, that it used to be that the people from the West would go and they would talk to the Chinese. Now there's a conversation going on, because we have so much to learn from the Chinese, and I think that that's probably well said. Anything else that you've observed in your leadership role there?
No, I think that the cultural piece is what I emphasize to my team, because our Asia headquarters for Asia is in Shanghai, and then Shanghai. So we can't force the China culture or the U.S. culture into when we go visit other countries. And every visitor we have, our U.S. expats we send here, the first thing we do is cultural induction, because the cultural sensitivity is so important. I spend most of my more time in the U.S. than in China, and we tend to be very U.S. centric. You think, our way is the better way, but it might be the better way, but it might not be the way to get things done here. So I think the cultural sensitivity is a very critical piece. Understanding how each market works is very, very important, for the very important factor for success.
Well, it sounds like we all here do still have a lot to learn, and that's it's thrilling in some way that there's opportunity now, I think, to have real conversation. So I want to thank you for your insights, because they were really terrific, Christine. This was helpful to me, and I know the people that listen to this will find it helpful as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. Good talking to you.